Let's talk about some of the coaching matchups because this is a fun one. 49er fans know Vic Fangio very, very well. Remember, Vic Fangio was the defensive coordinator here for Harbaugh and put together some fantastic defenses. He did try his hand in head coaching and, not great at that with the Broncos, but overall, he's always been a fantastic defensive coordinator. In fact, Shanahan wanted to bring him in potentially a couple years ago before he went to Miami. And now he's with the Philadelphia Eagles. You put out some great stats on Shanahan versus Fangio. From what I understand, Shanahan is 1-3 versus Fangio. He's never scored more than 15 points in those games, averages just 10.25 points per game in those 4 games. Why is it that you think Fangio has Shanahan's number? And especially, this is interesting timing because another guy that's had Shanahan's number a little bit is McDonald, and he just put on a masterclass last week. Fangio is going to be able to watch that film and go, oh, yeah, we can do a lot of those same things on top of what I already do well against Shanahan. Talk to me about this matchup.
It's a great matchup. If you're into X's and O's and the nuances of coaching and the complexities of scheme and play designs and the plan of play calling sequencing, this is as good as it gets. I think Kyle Shanahan has been and is one of the best offensive minds in the sport, and Vic Fangio is looked at as the godfather. Peter Schrager was on ESPN this morning, and he was talking about how Sean McVay has said that sometimes he can't sleep prior to a matchup with Vic Fangio because he knows that the matchup is going to be so difficult because Vic is so well prepared. He's been around the block. This is a guy who's been in the NFL for decades and decades. And it reminds me a lot of a defensive coordinator who Andy Reid had in the early 2000s, who was also looked at as an OG and a godfather, and that was Jim Johnson. Now, Jim Johnson, a little bit different than Vic Fangio. He was known to be very aggressive, and he blitzed a lot. Vic Fangio historically didn't blitz all that much, although this year he started to blitz a little bit more because he hasn't had quite the same horses up front along the defensive line that he had maybe last year with the Eagles. What makes Fangio so good? I just think that he has a great play calling feel. I think that he sequences plays really well. His defenses do such a good job of adapting and evolving to the opponent, and his game plans will change week in and week out. And it's dependent on the opponent. And I think that's what Bill Belichick did such a great job of during his entire New England Patriots tenure. And so Shanahan has had difficult times going up against Vic. 11 points, 6 points, 15 points, and 9 points in those 4 matchups. Last time they faced off was 2018. So it was a really long time ago. And I know some people want to point to the fact that Shanahan starting quarterbacks in those games were John Beck, Jimmy Garoppolo, Nick Mullins, and RG3. All right, well, RG3 and Jimmy Garoppolo were 2 of Kyle Shanahan's starters in 2 of those games. And what we know is that regardless of the quarterback that Vic Fangio goes up against, like, his defenses are going to be really, really well prepared. One thing that he said recently, too, it's like, look, Howie Roseman has done a great job of giving me players, and they make me look really smart. But this is a defensive unit that has been very consistent and highly productive since Fangio went to Philly going into 2024. The last 2 years, they're first in opponent's points per game at 18.3, first in defensive efficiency, first in net yards per attempt, second in opponent yards per play, second in yards per game at 296.9. So the big numbers there. Points per game, 18.3 in the modern era of the NFL. That's really hard to do. And then he's held opponents on average to under 300 yards per game. And so what Mike Macdonald did against Kyle, I thought was so impressive. I mean, he flummoxed Shanahan. 3 points, less than 200 yards of offense, little more than 4 yards per pass, considering how hot the Niners offense was with Brock Purdy. So expect Vic Fangio to mix up looks. He'll go man coverage. He'll go zone coverage. He'll tease blitzes. Sometimes he will blitz, but it comes down to him having horses. And what I'm worried about from the Niners standpoint is the Eagles defensive linemen going up against this Niners offensive line with or without Trent Williams. If Trent is on the field, obviously that boosts up the Niners offensive line. If he's not, I think that this Eagles defensive line could really manhandle the Niners offensive line, kind of like we saw Seattle do on Saturday night.
Yeah, absolutely. And this Eagles defense has taken even another step forward since the trade deadline. I mean, they went out and got an edge and Phillips, and it's really helped them out. Plus, they had a great player unretire. Now, I mean,
Yep.
obviously a little bit older. Graham's a little bit older, but still he's a contributor. And on
He
top of
had
that,
3 sacks and 7 snaps a couple weeks ago. It was
I
crazy.
know,
Yeah.
he's insane. Well, he's just rested, really, is what it comes down to. Like, he didn't have to put all the mileage on himself during the season.
Yeah.
And then Azeez Ojulari, who's a guy a lot of 49er fans wanted last year's trade deadline, is on Philadelphia. People forget he's been on IR. He's now been activated. They've got crazy, crazy depth, especially as pass rushers. So Fangio has a lot at his disposal, and they've been even better since the trade deadline. Now, one thing I did notice is that you can run on Philly, statistically at least,
Yes.
a lot more than you can on Seattle. However, as far as a passing defense goes, when you just measure it by yards, Seattle gives up about 193 yards passing per game. Philly's actually better at 189. So they really might give Brock Purdy and Shanahan major fits when it comes to the passing game. That means that CMC and this run game are really, really going to have to be ready to potentially carry the load. If there's anything you can do against this defense, is probably running. Am I right about that, or has
Yeah.
things changed over the last couple of weeks?
No, I would say if there's one way for the Niners to expose this Eagles defense, it is by running the ball. The Eagles had a really bad performance stopping the run against Chicago on Black Friday. They gave up 284 rushing yards in that game. And Kyle Monangai and DeAndre Swift were just running crazy on that Eagles defense. Now, Jalen Carter wasn't necessarily healthy in that game. He had been dealing with 2 really bad shoulder ailments. He had to get procedures on both those shoulders after that game. But I just think from a scheme standpoint, play design, play calling perspective, I just thought that Ben Johnson had the edge in that game over Vic Fangio. And I thought that a lot of the Eagles defenders were over pursuing. They were a little bit confused. They were late to react. And while this Eagles defense since week 8 is number 1 in the NFL in points per game given up at just 14.5, during that stretch, they have given up 122 rushing yards per game. And so this Niners offense is so much better when they can get the ground game going. It's been a problem this year. They're 30th in yards per carry. I think that's more of an offensive line issue as compared to Christian McCaffrey not being good, because I think McCaffrey's had a pretty good year. The Eagles have had a little bit of a similar problem with the yards before contact. That's also been a problem for San Francisco this season. But Kyle Shanahan has a dynamic running scheme. Ben Johnson is kind of known as like the Midwest Kyle Shanahan. And so if the Niners can find success on the ground and they can just kind of like eat the clock and keep that Eagles offense on the sideline, the Eagles offense has really struggled to find a rhythm and find a footing all year. Then the crowd starts to get tense and they start to boo if the Eagles go 3 and out. And then the team starts to feel it a little bit. And then the Eagles the Eagles fans get on the Eagles and things start to get a little bit tight. And then the Niners start to thrive on that. And then they get the play action game going through the pass game off of the run. That's when that offense becomes really hard to stop. But as we saw against Seattle, like if the Niners can't pass protect or they can't run block, just forget about it. Like Brock Purdy didn't have a chance to do anything. And Kyle Shanahan tried to move the pocket to the right. He tried to move the pocket to the left. He tried to operate play action, but Seattle was just all over it because they dominated the point of attack. And so that's what Philadelphia's going to have to do. And that's what the Niners are going to have to do conversely. If they can run the ball successfully, I think they have a chance in this game as now 5.5-point underdogs. That line has gone up by a point.
Yeah, it continues to climb a little bit. Let's get to some supers here real quick. Abramos, so happy to see you. He says it twice that it's great to see a familiar face. Jason says, Chase Sr. with the fair and balanced coverage. Who does he tap the keg more for? The watch along on Sunday, though.
We'll have a beer boot filled up, and we'll be taking down some beers for both sides.
Yeah, there we go. Tommy says, why win this game to be sent home by the Seagulls? Yeah, I mean, I listen.
It'd be a statement win, man. Going on the road
would be a statement.
as
You gotta
5.5-point
one.
underdogs. You
Yes.
beat the Eagles. Like
Yes.
there's some rivalry juices flowing. It would be a huge win for San Francisco. And I'll tell you what, the Eagles want to win this game too, given what happened in 2023. There's some bad blood there.
Right now, you guys have an offensive coordinator that is, I don't know how you guys feel about him in Philly, but it's pretty clear to me that this offense is struggling in large part because of him. There's way too much talent on that roster, Chase, for it to struggle the way that it does at times. I think there's been three halves this year where they've had negative passing yards. I don't even know how that's possible. It's like, and even like the most basic NFL fan, when they hear names on Philadelphia's roster, they're like, "Oh yeah, I know that," or "I know that offensive lineman." Four of the five offensive linemen are household names for most NFL fans, which is not normal for most teams. The Eagles have star power, but man, they really do struggle at times offensively. Is it as simple as, hey, they just got a bad offensive coordinator, or is there more to it?
Yeah, I think it's multi-layered, and the Eagles have the highest paid offensive unit in the NFL. And when you think about an offensive unit that has Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, a high-priced offensive line, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, it's unacceptable that they've had some of the performances that they've had. Number one and 3-and-out rate in the NFL as far as offensive DVOA among teams in the playoffs. They're 14th out of 14th. It shouldn't happen. And to the multi-layered point of that, I think there's been a lack of first down efficiency, which has been a problem. That then puts the play caller in a pinch and in a hole where the playbook gets closed up a little bit, and he's kind of limited in what he can call, which then leads to the offense being predictable. I think the offensive line has really regressed year over year. That's impacted the pass game, but also the run game, which is really the engine that makes this offense go, especially since Saquon Barkley came to town. Penalties have been a massive problem for the Eagles as well. I also think it comes down to player execution. There have been times where guys are flat out missing blocks, offensive linemen are whiffing, Jalen Hurts is making a bad throw or missing a throw. There's been a drop here and there. It's also Kevin Patullo too. Like when I talk about play calling feel and play calling sequencing, you can feel it and sense it when you watch a Kyle Shanahan or a Sean McVay on defense, a Vic Fangio, a Mike McDonald. There is synergy with how they call the game, and it makes sense from a rhythmic and flow standpoint. For Kevin Patullo, sometimes it's like run on first down, pass on second down. If it's third and long, gonna be a pass. If something is working, why not go back to it? Kevin Patullo like won't go back to it another time in that game. And it just doesn't make sense. Not calling crossers. Like Jalen Hurts this year, I think it was 31 of 35 targeting crossers. He was surgical, right? Which is big in this game against the Niners because they're so depleted at linebacker. But the Eagles ran crossers at the third lowest rate in the NFL. How do you not do that? So the Eagles have so much more talent on offense than the Niners do on defense. They should be able to score 30 points in this game. But Robert Saleh is a much better coach than Kevin Patullo, which is why the Niners have a shot in this game.
Okay, well, question for you then, because if the Eagles lose in round one, that would be a major disappointment. Does he get fired? Does Patullo get fired if they lose in round
I
one?
think he does. Yeah.
Okay, so a name that just happens to be available all of a sudden, Mike McDaniel. Do you think that's a name that they would heavily go after and invest in?
Yeah, I think Mike McDaniel would be interesting for the Eagles. Nick Sirianni, this is the offense is also a Nick Sirianni problem. Like it is his scheme, and he kind of has a way of doing things as far as his offensive philosophy. And it's very different from like the Kyle Shanahan tree of all the window dressing and the pre-snap motion. Sirianni values a dynamic running game, but it's more of a north-south physical approach as compared to the outside zone, utilizing a fullback and having all that pre-snap motion to kind of confuse the defense. So I do think Mike McDaniel could be a really good offensive coordinator for another team, but I think there are better options for him. Like I look at Detroit, that's a great place where he can resurrect his career. They have a bunch of weapons, and we saw what Ben Johnson was able to do with the Lions. I think the Commanders would be great for Mike McDaniel. You get to work with Jaden Daniels, who I know had a down year in year two due to his play and his injuries, but I love what he did during his rookie year. I also wouldn't be surprised, and I would love this for Robert Saleh because I want to see him have success. Imagine if Saleh gets the Ravens job, and that's a defensive-oriented organization. He can run the defense.
Yeah.
Mike McDaniel can run the offense, and Mike McDaniel pairs up with Lamar Jackson. Robert Saleh never had a Lamar Jackson when he was with the New York Jets. The defenses played well. The offenses were bad because Aaron Rodgers got hurt and he had Zach Wilson and a bunch of slop. So I don't think the Eagles would go the route of Mike McDaniel. I think they would go maybe like a Todd Monken, something like that. But if they
Mm.
win a couple playoff games, like I could see them running it back with Patullo because Jalen Hurts has had a different OC 10 times in the last 10 years, which is crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. It's so funny you say that. I think that's been a pretty popular opinion. I've thought it as well. I'm like, God, the Ravens with McDaniel at
Oh,
OC and Saleh as their head coach would be incredible.
yep.
And then I thought about even the Cardinals. Like, could you imagine if those two go there, they're in division, and let's say they make a trade for, I don't know, Mac Jones or something? It could get interesting. It could
No
get
doubt.
interesting. So, anyways, there's a lot of different places. I'm excited for the offseason, but we are not there yet. Joseph Ernberg says knocking out the Eagles makes this season a success. I agree with that, by the way. I completely agree with that. And Dazza says, how does an Eagles offense with so much talent look so mediocre all season? If that happens like the Bills game, the Niners do have a shot. Well, the Niners definitely have a shot. I mean, listen, this is not a perfect Eagles team. It's a supremely talented Eagles team. There's no doubt
Yeah.
about that. But this is a far from perfect Eagles team. Now, maybe it's as simple as they turn it up come playoff time. We will see. But Chase, it is time. It is time to make our picks for this game. And I'm going to go first on this one. I'll let you mull this one over. I'm sure you've had plenty of time to think. But
Well,
ultimately, man, I just after last week, it's hard for me to believe that the 49ers offense is going to have an explosion anywhere near what they had the previous 3 weeks where they averaged just over 42 points a game. I don't think it'll be as bad as last week at 3 points, but traveling from west to east, you're playing an Eagles team who is the healthiest they've been in quite some time. They're at home. They just rested their players last week, by the way. I just don't. It's hard for me to envision a scenario where the 49ers just put up crazy points. And I think in order for them to win, they have to turn this into a bit of a shootout. They have to force the Eagles offense to play keep up. And I don't know if they're going to be able to do that with Vic Fangio on the other side and all that defensive talent. So I do think it's a close one. I think the 49ers absolutely have a path to victory here, but ultimately I am going to pick the Eagles to win this one 23-20. Who are you picking in this game, Chase? And what's your
That's
score
funny. In
prediction?
my preview, I went Eagles 26-23. And
Mm,
this is why I think the Eagles win this game. Number one, they have the rest advantage, but that I think is huge because the Niners are a really banged up team. They're also playing at home, and the Niners have to travel across the country after playing in a really physical game against Seattle, in which they got beat up and they come into this game limping. I just think that top to bottom, the Eagles have more roster talent. And I'm a big believer that the game of football oftentimes is decided in the trenches. Sometimes you have to watch the game from the sideline, right? Which team is getting that push? And I just think the Eagles have the clear edge in the trenches. And we saw that the Niners, with their defensive line and their offensive line, they were really bad and exposed against Seattle. And this Eagles defense isn't quite to the level of Seattle, but they're damn good. I think they've been like third best over the last like couple months behind Seattle and Houston. And those two defenses, I think, are Super Bowl caliber. And I just think if the Niners want to win this game, they're gonna have to play nearly perfect, or they're gonna have to have a game, excuse me, like they did against the Rams, right? Where like they got a 4th-and-1 stop to end the game. The Alfred Collins peanut punch along the goal line. Mac Jones had the game of his life. Kendrick Bourne had the game of his life. They were able to generate a couple of turnovers. Like that's what the Niners would have to do to win this game, because I think talent wins out in a situation like this. Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts are also 5-0 at home at Lincoln Financial Field in the playoffs. So difficult
mm.
place to play. And I just think the Niners come into this game a little bit wounded, whereas the Eagles being rested really helps them out.